Hi, my name is Rickard, and in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to use the new Frames tool in Photoshop. This tool is kind of a mix between smart objects and masks and images. What it allows you to do is essentially create a frame that you can drop images into. Smart objects do allow the same thing, although you can't do the drag and drop. So that drag and drop feature is great. And if you think with that, you can think with how to use the tool. For example, if you're building a template where you know an image is going to be interchangeable, or if you're building something with a logo and you want that logo to be interchangeable. So basically, anytime you're building a template, Photoshop frames are great for that because they allow you to just go to your Finder or go to CC Libraries and drag images straight into those frames. So for this tutorial, what we're going to do is we're going to build a home page using almost entirely frames, and then I'm going to show you once we're done how easy it is to take that website and because we've set it up with frames, switch out all the images and create a different website but using that same template. All the assets that I use in this tutorial you can get in the info for this video. You'll see the link that'll take you to get all the assets to follow along with the tutorial. Also, if you like this tutorial, please subscribe to my channel. It helps me a lot and it allows me to create more videos for you. So there you go, let's get started. So let's first start by creating a new document. And we're going to call this homepage. We're going to make it 1280 wide and 3720 tall. We want the resolution to be 72, RGB color, and white. So let's go ahead and create that. So there you go. This is going to be our home page. And the next thing we want to do is set up some guides. So let's go ahead and go to New Guide Layout. This is already set how I want it, but let's go ahead and click on Default, and we're going to set it up how we want it now. So for columns, I want 4 columns, and I don't want any gutter. I want 10 rows, again with no gutter, and I want a top margin of 70 and no left margin. I want a bottom margin of 460 and no right margin. So there you go. I'll pause this for a second so you can look at the settings. We've got 4 columns, 10 rows, 70 pixel top margin, and a 460 bottom margin. We're going to clear existing guides even though we don't have any, and let's hit OK. So now we have in place all our guides, and the next thing we're going to do is put in place all of our frames. Now you'll see the new frame tool here. The shortcut for the frame tool is K. So let's go ahead and hit K on our keyboard. Let's zoom in here. The first frame is going to be for our website logo. So let's go ahead and place that right here. I'm going to hold down Shift so it stays square. And that's good. Let's place that in the center there. Perfect. All right, next I want a frame here for our top banner of the website. So let's go ahead and create that. There you go. Next, I want 4 frames here. So let's go ahead and create one here. And then I'm going to hold down Option. Just go ahead and drag that. Hold down Shift so I select both of them, drag those down. And I want another logo here. So let's go ahead and hold down Shift to make that square. Place that right about there. Next, I want an image here, so I'm going to make a frame here. And right now I'm creating all the frames, and what we'll do is we'll populate them with content in the next step. Here I want another large one, and I'm going to hold down Option, drag that. I want 2 images there. I want a large image here, and a large image here. Okay, so now we have all of our primary frames in place. Next, what I want to do is I'm going to go on the bottom here and go on the marquee tool, and I want to fill this background here. I want to create a new layer, and we'll call this layer header. I want to fill this with a dark gray. So let's go ahead with our colors here, and let's pick kind of a almost black color. Let's do 2A, 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 hit OK. We're going to go to Edit, Fill, Fill with the foreground color. Now you'll notice it's automatically framed that into this header frame, which I don't want. So let's go ahead and Control Z. What we're going to have to do, unfortunately, these frames, they kind of auto nest in unexpected ways. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and select all these layers by holding Shift and selecting, and then I'm going to do Control G to put those in a group, and I'm going to lock that group for now. And even with the locked group, you can see that it's still nesting. So let's go ahead and turn that off for now. And even then, it's still nesting. So as you can see, there are some issues with the frame tool in that it auto nests in ways that you really don't want it to sometimes. So to get around that, I'm going to lock this, which is the pre-nesting, and let's see if that solves the problem. Still doesn't solve the problem. So as you can see, there are still bugs with this tool. So how do we get around this issue? Well, we can sequence our workflow so that we create those things first and then add the frames. Or in this case, what I'm going to try to do is lock this frame specifically as opposed to locking the group. Let's see if that solves our problem. So with that frame locked, oops, let's go on that layer. And there you can see now it prevented that auto nesting. So this is a problem I have with frames, but there are workarounds for it. So there you go. We have that background, and now what I want to do is I want to add some menu items to our top header here. So let's go ahead and go in the type tool, which is T. I want my type to be white. I want a Nanido Sans at 14 point. That's good. And let's add our menu items. And we're going to make a home page for a burger site. So for our top menu, we're going to have burger, menu, blog, an about, a contact, and finally a store. I'm going to take all those and use the new distribute space evenly tool, and that's going to put an equal amount of space between all these items. And then I'm going to take the first three here and put them on the left side of the logo, and take the last three. I want them to have an equal space there. So there you go. We now have our menu in place, and let's select this. I'm going to delete this group now. So we're going to delete group, but group only, not the group contents. And we're going to take the header and that first frame and put those in a group. So there you go. We have that in a group, and we'll call this group header. This we're going to put in a group, and we're going to call this slider. Okay, and then next I want to add some text here, so let's go ahead and do that. Let's go back on our text tool. I'm going to change the color to our off black color, and let's put this on 16 point, and let's make a text box. And to make a text box, you click and drag. And one of the new features in Photoshop CC 2019 is that it adds lorem ipsum text for you, which is a nice addition when you're creating designs like this. And the other thing I want is I want a headline there. So let's drag this down. And I don't want the headline to be in a text box, so I'm just going to click, and that's going to create point type. And let's change this font to Playfair Display bold, and let's change it to 32. And there you go. All right, let's add. Okay, so that looks good for my type there. And now I want this, basically all these, to be part of a group. So I'm going to go ahead, hold down Command, and select all these layers. And you can see that they've selected them here in my layer palette. And drag this up so you can see more. And let's hit Command G to group those, and we're going to call this row 1. Then I want to take the text, the 2 text layers, and hold Option, drag those, and place those here. And then I want to select this. And because these are still in this group, I'm just going to drag this like this so that we have them all out of that group. And let's call this row number 2. And here, this is going to be a dark image with light text on top of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select these 2 text layers again, hold down Option, drag those to here, and select these 2 boxes, select the text here. Now because these options are above, it's having a hard time selecting the text underneath. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the 2 copies of text here, and I'm going to actually drag them up above some of these here. So now I can select that, select the 2 text layers and group all those. And we're going to call this row 3. And for this one, I want text up here, and then I want one large background image. So let's go ahead and again take our 2 text layers. We're going to hold down Option, drag them to where I want them here. And we're going to call this section Get in Touch. And I want to make this text box a little bit wider so that it spans both those columns there. And let's get rid of that. There you go. Okay, so let's select those 2 text layers plus this, put those in a group. Perfect. Let's call that row 4. Or actually, let's call this Get in Touch. And then finally, this is our footer. And in our footer, I want 2 rows of text, and then I actually want one more frame on top of this frame. And I'm going to show you how to do that because of the nesting problem that we saw before. I'll show you how to get around that. First, let's take just this text layer here. We want the frame to be under the text. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to take just this text layer, hold down Option, drag that down here, go in my text tool, and let's make this box, let's make it left aligned. We're going to have one box of text here. I want a little bit more text in here, so what I can go is go to Type and paste lorem ipsum. There you go. And we're going to make another box next to it, up there. Let's take both of those, drag them over a bit. And let's put those above our footer frame So this is all of our footer right now. And again, like I mentioned, I want one more frame here. Now, if I try to create a frame, you'll notice as soon as I go here, there's no way for me to create a frame. Like you would think that if I held down Option or held down Shift, I could create a frame on top of a frame. But right now, in its infancy, this frame does not allow me to do that. So the workaround is to make a frame outside of your pasteboard and then just drag it on top like so. All right, so we now have all of our frames in place, and now I'm going to start showing you what you can do with frames in Photoshop. So let's take these last layers here, including those two text layers, and actually I want these two text layers here. I believe these are them, yeah. Let's drag those on top there, and this frame here is in the right place. Perfect. Okay, good. So let's actually put these two text frames at the very top. And I'm going to go back on the text tool and I'm going to change the point size to 14. And I'm going to drag these up just a little. About so. And what I want to do is I want to add a line at the very bottom. And in a actual website design, this is where we would put the copyright and so forth. But we'll do that afterwards. Okay, so now that we have all of our frames in place, what we can do is open our Finder and we can drag elements straight from our Finder into Photoshop. So let's go food site, and the first image here is a logo, so I'm going to go ahead and drag that into this frame here. Now you'll notice what happened is it placed it in, it just placed it, it didn't actually place it into this frame, and the reason for that is, where is that frame? That frame is going to be in the header, and that's because the nesting was locked from when I was creating this. So let's go ahead and unlock that. And look at that, look at that. It's created that same problem again. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a copy of this, and then I'm going to select this layer, and I'm going to go remove layer from frame. So now I have my header there, and I have my header frame as a separate element, and I want this header to be below my menu items there. All right, so now we have what we need. And so this is the one problem I have already I mentioned, which is that the nesting on frames is not consistent. But here we go, we now have it in place. Let's open our Finder again, and we're going to drag that logo into this frame. And because the logo is black, I'm going to select the logo here, and you can select the frame independent. So similar to a mask or similar to a smart object that has a mask, your frame can be selected independent of the image that's inside the frame. So I'm going to select the frame image here, go down to my effects and put a color overlay on it. That's white. So there you go. We now have our logo there. Here I want a large image, so let's go back to our Finder and let's drag that in there. Now you can see what Photoshop does is it uses its own AI to determine what it thinks is the best layout for that image. Now in this case, I want the image to be a little higher, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down Command, click on the layer, and what that does is it selects just the image. And you can see here in my layer palette, if we open the slider, that if I select the image, I can slide it inside the frame. If I select the frame, I'm going to be moving both of them. So let's do Control Z. I want to just select the image, drag that up so we can see a little bit more of that table and so that the burger is a little bit more centered. There you go. That looks good. All right, let's go back to our Finder. And we're going to take this image, put it here. And for this image, what I want is I want it to be black and white and kind of just a background. So let's go ahead and select that. That's going to be in row 1 here. And what I want to do here is add a gradient map. Now that's going to add it on top of the whole image. So I'm going to hold down Option between the two layers so it groups it just to that image. What I want to do here is in my gradient editor, I want to go from my current almost black color to pretty dark. So I'm going to select this white here and I'm going to select the color just from about right there. So there you can see now it's really just acting as a background. I could go a little bit lighter here just so you can see the image a little bit better, but that's about what I want. So let's hit OK there. And then let's go back to our Finder. That I want to be a full image. This I want to be a full image. And this I again want to be my gray image. And I want these two centered in here. So I'm going to double click here. Oops. I'm going to select the layer and hold down. I want to make sure I just have the layer selected, not the frame. So I can drag it over like that. And I want this to have the same gray effect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my gradient map, hold down Option and drag it up here, and then link it back to this, or nest it back to that. So there you go, I have that. I want my logo in here. So let's go back, drag that logo in. That looks good. Next, I want an image here. So let's go back to our Finder, drag that image in. Oops, that's the wrong one. Yeah, this is the one I want here. That looks good. And down here, I want this image. And I mentioned earlier I want this text to be white over gray. So in this case, we're going to take our gradient map again, drag it up here, holding down Option, nest it to that. And I'm going to take my text here, go in the text tool, and change it to white. And we'll do that for both of them. Good. All right, I'm going to go back to my Finder, drag this guy in. And for the background here, I kind of want a grayed out image. So what I'm going to do is take this image here, drag it in there. And on that image, I'm going to go to here, and let's put a threshold on it. Group that. And then let's put levels on there. We can use curves too. But let's use levels. I'm going to group that, and in my levels, I'm going to take my black point, raise it, so that we just have like this light shade there, which is what I want. And I can also go into my threshold and control how much is showing. So I don't want the sky showing, but I do want those palm trees showing. So about there looks good. All right, and for my last section, let's go back to the Finder. I'm going to drag this guy in there. And we're going to take our gradient map, drag that up here, holding down Option so it makes a copy again, and group that again. And for this text here, I also want that white. So let's go in the Type tool, change that to white. Now another way to change the type is if I have white as my foreground color, I can hold down Option and hit Delete. So let's go ahead and do that. And I want my logo to appear there. So let's go back to the Finder, grab our logo, put it in there, and let's put a color overlay on that to make it white. Okay, and then the last thing I want to do is I want to have 3 headshots here. So in the case of this website, we have 3 headshots here of the people that work in the company. Now, theoretically, my first thought was let's use the circular frame and make 3 frames here. Whoops. Again, because I already have frames, I would have to really just make them out here and drag them in, which I can do. Whoops. Let's go ahead Make it a little smaller. So that's about where I want it. Now, here I'm going to show you the problem I ran into. Let's go ahead and open the Finder. Let's take our first headshot and drag it in there. So far so good. But what I want to do is I want to add a little drop shadow. So now if I go in here and go to drop shadow, you're going to see what happens. So it's actually adding the drop shadow to the image of the lady as opposed to adding the drop shadow to the frame. So in this case, you can't see the drop shadow. So how do we get around that? What I found is rather than using a frame, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just use a standard marquee. And I'm going to make the circle how I want it. So that's about the size I want right there. Let's go ahead and make a new layer. And let's just go ahead and fill that with a gray color. So I'm going to hold down Option Delete to fill with my foreground color. So there's the box. And now what I'm going to do is go back to the Finder, drag her in here. And of course it auto nests. Therein lies the problem with frames. Okay, so to prevent that auto framing, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag it in, but I'm not going to put it in here. It's still doing it. All right, let's make sure that layer's selected. Let's try this one more time, see if we can prevent this. So you see how that box is becoming gray there? That means it's going to drop it in the frame. So theoretically, if I drop it out here, it's not going to drop it in the frame. And there you go, it didn't. Okay, one new thing that kind of bugs me about Photoshop CC 2019 is that it now defaults to proportionate scaling, and I am really used to holding down the Shift key for proportional scaling. So I run into the error now of holding down Option and it's disproportionately scaling. So just remember that with 2019, you no longer need to hold down the Shift button unless you want to disproportionately scale. All right, so let's put the image there and let's group those so we can see the scaling, how that looks. Let's make her a little smaller. So that looks quite good. Now what I'm going to do is I want this to be a mask. So why I did the circle ahead of time was really just for design purposes. Even though I could do it this way, I want to set this whole document up with frames. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and select that circle by holding down Command. I'm going to unnest those, and then I'm going to add a mask using my circle selection. Now I can throw away my old circle there, and I have her in a circle masked. I can add my drop shadow, and let's go ahead and make this about 45 degrees. Let's make the distance, and kind of want it to show all the way around. So that looks pretty good. Let's hit OK there. Now what I'm going to do is right mouse click and say Frame from Layers. Add frame to layer. Okay, so now you can see what it's done. It's created a frame that's taken into account the drop shadow and taken into account the mask. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this, hold down Option to make a copy of it, and do that one more time. And there you go. So now we have 3 frames. Now we can go back to our Finder and drop our other images in, and you'll see they have the nice drop shadow and they're working properly as frames. And our last one. He's a little high, so I'm going to select just him, move him up a bit. Maybe Command T for transform, make him a bit smaller. And that looks quite good. So there you can see how fast, using frames, we can design a web page. And so that's using the new guide tools, the new guide layouts. You will notice that the frames kind of have this tendency to always show you this. So we can go to Deselect Layers to turn that off. And that looks quite nice. And that did not take us long to create a whole website. But now I'm going to show you the power of frames. Okay, hang on. Let me just fix one thing on this. For the header, I'm going to make this frame just a little bit bigger. And make this just a touch smaller. And that looks good. Let's go deselect. I created a shortcut, Shift Command D for deselect layer, just because I use that a lot. Okay, so now we're going to show you, or I'm going to show you, the power of frames. So now that we have our whole document set up and we've applied all the effects to it, I'm going to show you how easy it is to take this burger site and turn it into a nature site. So let's go back to our Finder. We have a second folder here called Nature Site. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the logo, drag it into that frame, and all of a sudden we have a new logo on the site. Let's go back. Let's change our header image. And let's change this image here. Now I'm toggling back and forth between my Finder and Photoshop. For this one, I want the image a little higher, so let's go ahead and just drag that. I can do a Command T for transform. Make that a little bit bigger there. That looks good. Let's go back to our Finder. And let's move down a bit. Back to the Finder. Put that image there. Let's make that a little bit bigger. Do a transform. I'm going to hold down Options so that it transforms from the centered anchor point there. That looks good. Back to my Finder. Put that image in there. Now generally, as I have two monitors, so I would usually just have the Finder open in another window or off to the side and drag stuff over. Usually you don't have to skip back and forth the way I'm doing between your Finder and Photoshop. You can just have your Finder open on another window and drag stuff over. All right, let's add this image back here. And in this case, I want to be able to see that bear in the background. So I'm going to select this, do a transform, and just kind of drag that so that our bear is showing there. And we can adjust the threshold on there. Just to get that a little more detail out of that bear there. That's good there. Back to our Finder. Let's take our 3 headshots. Let's drag her down a bit. Now when you put a new element into Photoshop this way, it defaults your selection. It defaults your selection to the item. So if you start dragging, you'll immediately start dragging the item and not the frame. And finally, we want to change our footer image. And we may want to make this a little bit darker. So let's go to that gradient map, select our dark color there and maybe make it like that. There you go. So there you have it. That's the power of frames in Photoshop. As you can see, we created the website quite fast, and then we were able to change the entire look of the website by just dragging images from our Finder straight into Photoshop. Now, frames also operate quite similarly to a smart object in that you can select the frame and then right mouse click here and relink to a different file, replace the contents, and so forth. Or you can also place into the frame from here. You can place embedded, place linked, and if you have your frame selected, it'll place it in there. But really the beauty of frames and what makes it different to smart objects and other tools that already existed in Photoshop is the fact that you can drag photos. You can drag photos from your library, or you can drag photos from your Finder straight into Photoshop and just drop them into frames. And it uses the Adobe artificial intelligence to place it and center it as best as it thinks possible. Now there are adjustments, like you saw as we went through and did this, there are adjustments to be made, but all of them are quite simple and quite fast. And yeah, there you have it. All right, that finishes our tutorial. Again, please subscribe. If you want the assets for this tutorial, go ahead, look in the info. There's a link there. And also, please check out my courses on nuclei.com. You can get training on photo compositing, retouching, frequency separation, all sorts of stuff. And with each course, we walk you through the entire project so that you can do it yourself. Each course is on average between 1 and 2 hours long, and each one takes you through a professional composite. I also have assets on my channel which you can download. Those include Photoshop brushes, presets, and so forth. So check them out. Until next time. This is that awkward silence where you see other videos playing on either side of me. And checking off.